So my name is Dr. Nina Bailey, and I'm here with Joanna
Scott-Lutyens.
And we're going to be talking to you today about mental health and the gut and the synergy of omega-3s and probiotics, and hopefully this will go smoothly for us. So as we were saying earlier, so for us at Igennus, this is a real pleasure to be able to be working with some probiotic specialists, because we do a lot of webinars, we do a lot of protocol webinars, and probiotics for us are the missing link. And so it's really nice to be working with you guys. You can tell us all about probiotics, and we're going to be concentrating on talking about mental health today.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much for having myself as in OptiBac Probiotics here to join you in this discussion. I'm really excited about it as well, because at OptiBac Probiotics we specialise entirely in probiotics and microbiome, and therefore, you know, talking to you and your knowledge about omega-3s is really great for me to have. And actually the topic mental health is actually something that's so important for all of us personally, either for us personally, you know, individually, or because we have friends, family who need support, or also as practitioners. I used to work as a nutritional therapist. So many of my clients who walked through the door had symptoms, conditions that actually stemmed from stress, anxiety, and we all know the knock-on effects that can have on our bodies and manifest itself physically. So this is a really interesting agenda today.
Yeah, and I think everything you're saying there is really valid, and I think, you know, some of the knock-on effects that sort of stress and anxiety can have, you know, and if we can sort of nip that in the bud quite early on, which, you know, is possible,
yeah,
then you know, that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And you dug out some really interesting figures.
Yeah, these figures, when I found them, I actually felt a little bit distressed by them, because everybody talks about being stressed, so on, but actually these figures show that out of, you know, 4,500 people, really 74% of those people actually felt so stressed that they have been overwhelmed or unable to cope, which is actually massive. And I think even more concerning is that 32% of those said that they had suicidal feelings as a result of that stress, which is just phenomenal, really.
Yeah, and a lot of those men.
Yeah.
So which is pretty scary as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I think men perhaps, you know, don't give themselves, or aren't able to give themselves the support network that maybe some women can. I know that's much of a generalisation, but I think when we're talking about stress, and it's an emotive thing as well, you know, I think there's this, it kind of goes back to that sort of feeling where society is driven by success.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're not allowed to be vulnerable, and we're success driven. It's, you know, and that's fast-paced life that we have here in the West isn't necessarily great for our mental health.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that figure of 1 in 4, 1 in 6 always sort of springs to mind, but seeing some figures like this is really quite interesting. You know, and we were also talking about, you know, use of antidepressants, which have their place, and, you know, they can be real lifesavers. But, you know, when you start going down the antidepressant line, it's usually at a point where you're then sort of putting plaster on something that needs fixing, and we really need to sort of be looking at addressing the root of the problem. And the root of the problem in this case is gut health. So we're going to move on, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about mental health and the gut. So what predisposes us to developing mood disorders?
Yeah, well, as just mentioned, a lot of it is very much starts with our lifestyle, our levels of stress, lifestyle being, you know, due to, as I mentioned, sort of perfection, success-driven society, you know, that we're not allowed to fail, we're not allowed to be vulnerable, we have to do this, you know, social media is all coming in at us really quickly.
Yeah.
A lot of pressures, a lot of multitasking, and that can lead to that stress. But also, of course, that fast-paced life also involves us in quite often kind of grabbing something to eat that might not be healthy, might just give us that lift. The fact that, you know, our modern life is, as we all know as practitioners, throwing foods at us that are not good for our guts and our bodies in general.
Yeah, and again, I mean, we touched on pharmaceuticals, but there was an interesting meta-analysis published last year, a USA-based one that was insinuating or giving some evidence that suggested that individuals who take 1, 2, 3 or more sort of pharmaceuticals are at an increased risk of developing depression, because a lot of the side effects that we see from, you know, anything from sort of, you know, blood pressure meds, even the sort of natural sort of ordinary contraceptive pill does have these kind of sort of unfortunate side effects. And so, you know, nutrition therapy really kind of comes into play here as well, because again, you know, as we know, pharmaceuticals, you know, you put these things into your body, but that also increases various nutrients. So, you know, we have to sort of balance everything out, don't we? And I
mean, I think there's always a time and a place, and sometimes, you know, there's a real necessity for pharmaceuticals. Absolutely, definitely, would never deny that. But I think, as you say, that, you know, one of the things also pharmaceuticals do tend to do is actually affect our gut.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it actually can really damage our gut health, which, as we will see in this webinar, is probably going to be not necessarily very helpful for the thing we're actually trying to help. So,
absolutely. Okay, so leaky gut. I mean, it's really kind of the hallmark, really, isn't it, of everything that sort of goes wrong in the gut. So leaky gut. I mean, probably practitioners' favourite topic, or one of them anyway. You know, leaky gut is being discovered to be, you know, a really big issue for all areas of health. No need for me to go through the entire list. We all know it really, but, you know, suffice to say that high sugar in the foods that we eat, or too much alcohol, can really affect our gut. Our genetics can as well. Stress can. But as you said, Nina, you know, the pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, and so on also contribute to creating a leaky gut, i.e. disrupting those tight junctions that we need. That's a barrier really for the rest of our body, and then can have a knock-on effect. But I think actually fundamental to leaky gut is the bottom one. It's dysbiosis. You know, we have a very our balance, our bodies are always trying to maintain homeostasis in every different way, whether it's our acid alkaline balance or our blood pressure, whatever it is, but also our gut. It's about being in balance. So our guts actually do have pathogenic bacteria in them. You know, that is a normal place to be. But it's when our pathogenic bacteria override the level of healthy bacteria we have in our gut that we end up with something called dysbiosis, or it allows parasites in, those kind of infections that actually then you've no longer got that lovely protective barrier, the sort of little army of protective bacteria that are going to look after the gut wall, and that's when the problems really start. Absolutely. Okay, so gut and brain.
So this is something, so, you know, as practitioners, we've always known the importance of leaky gut, but I think what's becoming more and more clear is that leaky gut actually does have a knock-on effect with, you know, obesity, diabetes. We've known about autoimmune diseases, but actually, you know, what's starting to come to the fore is actually that our gut has a huge effect on our brain and our mental health, and that's a really phenomenal idea. And I think, you know, when we will first hear about that, you think, well, how on earth can that happen? But actually, think about it, the brain has always had an effect on our gut. This is a bi-directional communication. So, you know, the brain, if you think about when you're excited about something, you know, you're going to get butterflies, so it's an immediate effect on your gut. You know, or if you're lounging around the lounge, you're in the sunshine on holiday, all that tension and the bloating you normally have after eating a bit of white bread or something, bingo, it's gone. Because your brain is telling your gut, you can be relaxed, we've got no stress.
This is true. Or the opposite way around, when your webinar fails.
Yes, or when the webinar fails, oh no.
Yes, and then those butterflies turn into something a little bit harder.
Oh God, you just think, oh no, what a nightmare. IT, we hate IT. So sorry about that. But so anyway, the gut also has an effect on the brain. So how on earth does it do that? So the bottom line is it's about gut integrity. So it's about the tight junctions in the gut we've been talking about. And the knock-on effect that then has on our immunity, so the immune function, which then has a knock-on effect on inflammation levels.
That's right.
And additional to that, also the neurotransmitter production in the gut, and the whole system is connected by the HPA axis and the vagus nerve. The whole thing is a real kind of mishmash of nerves, endocrine system, and microbes, and it's actually an incredibly detailed, quite complicated area, but really fascinating. And what I've known that OptiBac Probiotics for a while, that probiotics have been involved in this, but I did not know how omega-3s could be involved, really. So
this is what we're going to talk about. So, I mean, we're from a kind of an omega-3 sort of expertise, we always kind of think, you know, the brain, you know, it's full of fat, it's full of DHA, it's a little bit of EPA in there, but we don't really kind of think about omega-3s and gut health. And so this has been really educational for us here at Igennus, because, like I said, you know, our protocols always include probiotics, but actually, you know, that there is this relationship between omega-3s and gut health. And what seems to be really clear is that there is a really, really tight synergy between the two. So we know that probiotics work independently of omega-3 and omega-3 work independently, but actually you bring them together and certain mechanisms come into play. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, fascinating.
Okay, so tell me about probiotics.
Yeah.
Probiotics and gut health.
So we'll just briefly talk about the two areas a little bit separately, just to start off with. So I think we can use okay. So like I said, so the connection between gut and mental health is, you know, fairly recent, although it did kind of come to light in 2004 with when some research was basically done on some mice, where it was discovered that the existence or indeed type of bacteria present in the gut had an influence on the way that the mice dealt with imposed stress. That was the beginning of the gut link to the mind. This study you can see here in 2014, again, similar kind of research, and it was basically they used two different strains, Lactobacillus acidophilus, Rossel 52, Bifidobacterium Rossel 175, against the strain called Lactobacillus salivarius. The strain that was called exactly that. And interesting was that the first two strains had a really positive effect on the way that the mouse or the mice actually dealt with stress, whereas the third strain had no effect whatsoever. So what came to light there was that it was very strain specific. So specific strains of bacteria will help, and other bacterial strains will not necessarily, which is really interesting for us, you know, because we now know that this is not just for mental health, this is also for other areas, like some strains will be particularly good for diarrhea, some strains will be particularly good for constipation, some for immunity. So that's, you know, it's an interesting concept.
And I think it's really useful to know this kind of information, because when you're choosing probiotics, and if you're like me and you kind of think you know a lot, but you don't actually know a huge amount, when you're kind of getting that education about strains and what you should really be looking for, and it really helps you to kind of narrow things down a little bit, because there are so many probiotic products on the market, and if they're not really identifying strains, then, you know, we don't really know what we're kind of looking at. There's an awful lot of lactobacillus products. There's an awful lot of I can't even say them, bifidobacterium products. But unless you know what the strain is, you don't know what the research is. And this kind of level of evidence it just provides so much, information. We can gather this, and then we can start looking at what happens in sort of human studies.
Exactly, and that's precisely, it's so important that, you know, we can actually look at what the research behind particular strains and therefore the product actually is, so that you know, firstly, what they're particularly well researched for, but also that it's well researched.
Yeah.
And you'll see that the same two strains were also used in some research in human beings in a gold standard clinical trial, which is what we as practitioners always want to see, rather than mice. So 55 participants, I mean, it's not a huge study, but it's big enough to be statistically significant. And overall, you can see that in the probiotic group, there were reduced scores of depression and hostility and stress, and showing that there's actually a connection between the gut and the nervous system.
I mean, this is just one of a number of studies, and we don't have the capacity to go through all of them, but really kind of sort of highlighting the evidence here. So if you want to go on PubMed and look these strains up yourself, then you will find lots of supporting evidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just want to mention one other study that's quite important, I think, because also it's actually quite difficult to get studies on mental health. I know we're all very quite hung up on research, and quite rightly so, because then we know that what we're taking is good quality and works. But it's actually important just to recognise the fact that mental health is not an easy area to research. So this is quite an interesting study, very recent, on major depressive disorder, where 14 patients were given probiotics, and actually you can see the results showed basically that there was a significant decrease in insulin levels, but also the CRP concentrations, which is the marker for inflammation, which is just perfect result, because we know that inflammation is associated with depression.
Yeah, and we also know that insulin resistance, or decreased insulin sensitivity is plays a major role in depression and dementia and sort of brain issues themselves. So it's good supporting evidence. And I see that there was raised glutathione as well, which is really good, because glutathione is our major antioxidant at the root at the core of the gut. So it's there to sort of kill off that high levels of oxidative stress that we see at that level. So keeping your glutathione levels high is really good. Good supporting evidence.
Yeah, I'd like to know more about omega.
Wow. Something that we do know about omega-3s, and I'm not going to go into sort of the core of the whole kind of omega-3 story, because a lot of the practitioners here will know most of it anyway. But what we do know is that if we look at the epidemiological evidence, that people who eat high levels of fish, or who take fish oil, have a lower risk of developing depression. And we also know that there is a relationship between omega-6 and omega-3. We kind of know that omega-6 tend to be kind of pro-inflammatory, omega-3 tend to be anti-inflammatory, and it's getting that balance right. We tend to consume a lot of omega-6, we don't consume enough omega-3. And that by doing that, having lower levels of omega-3, we increase our risk of developing inflammatory conditions. And again, so if we look at depression, not only are omega-3 levels associated with depression risk, but actually with the sort of symptoms as well. So the lower your omega-3s, if you're suffering from depression, then the more severe your symptoms will be. And we can summarize the sort of relationship between omega-6 and omega-3 through something called the AA to EPA ratio. So AA, arachidonic acid, is pro-inflammatory. EPA is our key anti-inflammatory omega-3, and a ratio between the two tells us our inflammatory potential. And our sort of classic Western diet tends to sort of result in a higher AA to EPA ratio. And omega-3s, we can measure those through something called the omega-3 index, which tells us how much omega-3 is actually in our cells themselves. So generally, a low omega-3 index, high AA to EPA ratios are associated with both risk and severity of depression. And when it comes to looking at omega-3 interventions, and again, go onto PubMed, have a look for yourselves. I was trying to list all of the studies that I found, and I kind of gave up at about 20. So there have been so many meta-analysis and reviews of omega-3s, and not all of them have been particularly positive. And probiotics and omega-3s both get a bit of a bad press. And that's a little bit about, let's look at the methodology. Yeah. Because if you're not doing it quite right, you're not going to necessarily always get the results or see the results that you would expect to see. And certainly when it comes to omega-3 studies, we know that, if you follow some certain guidelines, so if you look at the bioavailability of your supplement, because it's not about taking omega-3s, it's about getting it into your system. So we look at things like the esterified triglyceride, the EPA to DHA ratio, and this is something that comes out time and time again with meta-analysis. The amount of omega-3 that is EPA is crucial to your intervention, and you should be aiming for at least 60% EPA, preferably pure EPA. But obviously, you know, a little bit of DHA in there is not going to sort of hamper it too much. The length of your intervention, and I don't know if this is something that you see in sort of probiotic studies, but, you know, if you give somebody omega-3s for a couple of months or a couple of weeks or 8 weeks, then, you know, don't be surprised if you don't see, you know, a positive outcome. You have to persevere a good 6 months. And then fish oil quality as well. So there's a lot of, again, a bit like probiotics, there's a lot of omega-3 supplements out there. They're not all the same in terms of the purity, the concentration, and the toe tox value. For those of you who do not know, it gives you an indication of how rancid your fish oil is. So if you want something that's pure and clean, you have to go for something with a low toe tox value that's high concentration, high strength, re-esterified. And if you're not looking at baseline levels, so again, the lower your levels, the more you need. If you're not testing omega-3 levels, then you need to be looking at least a gram a day. And, you know, people are quite shocked by that.
Yeah, I think people don't realise you need to take that much, actually.
Yeah. And most people will underestimate how much omega-3 that is actually in their diet. So it's quite interesting. People say, how much? How long do I have to take this much for? And it's, you know, how long do you want to have healthy levels of omega-3? So these are the kind of key sort of variables that we need to sort of focus on when we're looking at interventions with omega-3. And this is sort of besides looking at sort of mechanisms. We know that this is the case. So if you follow these, you'll see good results.
Okay, great.
So when we are sort of considering, if we sort of backtrack slightly, so we know that probiotics are good, we know that omega-3s are good. If we're concentrating now on sort of gut function and what they do within the gut, then we have to have a little bit of an understanding of what happens when things go wrong. Yeah. So what happens when we have a dysbiotic gut? Okay. So one of the key things is that, you know, the gut flora, they give out lots of different sort of byproducts. Yeah. Some of those are good, some of those are bad. You have lipopolysaccharides, which are not so good, can induce an inflammatory response. And then we see things like short-chain fatty acids, like butyrate, for example, tend to be decreased. And we see these sort of levels in individuals who are depressed. So people who are depressed have lower levels of butyrate, for example.
That's really
the outcome of that is that, you know, with decreased barrier function, so your lipopolysaccharides, you know, they start disrupting your tight junctions, they start activating toll-like 4 receptors. We then get nuclear factor kappa B going a bit crazy, producing loads of pro-inflammatory cytokines. They in turn start upregulating our Th17 cells, which then say, hey, there's an inflammatory response going on. So they start producing more pro-inflammatory cytokines. And before you know it, it's all getting a bit out of hand. It's getting into the systemic circulation. And hey ho, sort of mechanism towards sort of depression, really. We do know that sort of pro-inflammatory cytokines that are frequently implicated in depression include things like interleukin 6, interleukin B1, interleukin 1 beta, and TNF alpha. And individually, these are all involved in the differentiation of Th17 cells. So we see elevated Th17 cells in people with depression and increased levels of cytokines. So lowering these kind of areas is a sort of therapeutic intervention approach for sort of managing depression.
So,
tight junctions.
Tight junctions. So how do omegas help with our tight junctions then?
Well, okay, well, we know intestinal tight junction dysfunction is hallmark of leaky gut. So I love this little picture. It's like a little blanket with some stitching here. Anything that disrupts our tight junctions is going to allow things to get through. And the nice thing about omega-3s, and this is what we see at the level of the gut, is that we think of them as anti-inflammatory, but actually they also play a really important role in gene expression. Okay. And what we see at the level of the gut is omega-3s upregulating the expression of proteins, including occludin, zonulin, claudins, all involved in tight junctions.
These are actually vital.
Yeah, absolutely.
With our probiotics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And something that is quite interesting here as well. So this is study that was published in 2013, which kind of fits with the sort of therapeutic EPA versus DHA story, is that EPA appears to be more effective than DHA in actually upregulating these gene expressions. So yeah. Interesting.
That is interesting, yeah. It's amazing. I mean, obviously I had a vague idea about omega-3s, inflammatory pathways and so on, but I had no idea they had a direct effect on our tight junctions in our gut.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if we can get in at this level, then we're stopping this kind of cascade of events, which we're going to be looking at in a minute, that sort of, fuels the inflammatory pathway and fuels all the sort of like mechanisms down the line that result in things like depression and, mind fog and all those other kind of brain issues.
Yeah, so tight junctions. Well, we know that probiotics can really do help with tight junctions. They're vital. So obviously there are studies on specific strains that show this sort of response that you've got with omega-3s, but also probiotics. And one of them is, for example, Saccharomyces boulardii. It's one of the more studied strains in this area. And so again, we're going back to sort of strain specificity. And Saccharomyces boulardii is actually a really interesting one, because it's actually yeast.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stay in our bodies for very long. It's a transient yeast, whereas bacteria do stay, they adhere to the gut wall, they then repopulate. They work in a slightly different way, but Saccharomyces boulardii is actually very competitive in the sense that it actually helps combat pathogenic bacteria. So it has a lot of different ways in which it can help with tight junctions. So it helps with tight junctions in all the ways that as listed on the slide. It's anti-inflammatory, anti-secretion, pro-migratory. And it also, there's a study, for example, that shows the methods of action where it regulates E-cadherin. Now, remind me what that is again.
It's a cell adhesion molecule.
Dr. Bailey, thank you. But it also helps get rid of pathogenic bacteria by the fact it's got a sticky mannose surface, so it kind of, the bacteria then stick to it, and then it gets taken out of the body. It also detoxifies the toxins that pathogens give off. So it's an example of one strain of probiotic you can get that's really useful for this. But there are other strains of bacteria that have similar results for the same reasons. Now, it's quite hard to get all the research behind all of these things, but there's plenty of research out there. But actually, it's also, I always feel like you can get a little bit too, it's really good to like drill down into the specifics and the microbiology, but then you have to come back again, come back out of it and look at the bigger picture. And again, let's come back to dysbiosis. The fact that you've got pathogenic bacteria overgrowth, what is that doing to our tight junctions?
Yeah, I mean, a candida,
for example, or parasites that can be harmful to our, cause that inflammatory kind of reaction. And actually, if you don't have those healthy bacteria in enough numbers in your gut, then the pathogenic bacteria or the parasites or the sugar or the medications can get to your tight junctions. The alcohol, for example, has a better chance of, ruining those tight junctions. So again, yes, specific actions of probiotic bacteria, but also the generalistic kind of healthy microbiome, diverse, being able to give that microbiome a chance to become diverse again is really important.
Yeah, and I guess it's about sort of stepping back. Don't let things get out of hand. Let's deal with it in an appropriate kind of, way. But I mean, just talking about candida just for a second. I mean, this for me is something that flags up as a good sort of strain for
yes,
candida.
It will definitely be part of the protocol.
That's my probiotic knowledge.
Yeah, but let's not forget as well stress and tight junctions. Stress,
absolutely,
cortisol has a direct effect on those tight junctions. So let's be holistic about our approach here, and it's also about reducing our stress levels.
Yeah, and mucins, down-regulate mucins, and SIG-A as well. So stress is a bit of a it sort of rips your gut lining a bit, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then that exposes your tight junctions, and that's when everything starts to go wrong. Okay, so neurotransmitters.
Oh yeah, so this is a really fascinating one, golly. Yeah, so basically, we've known for quite a long time that 70% of our immune system is based in our gut, but what is transpiring is that actually our neurotransmitters are, a lot of them are produced, a big percentage of them is produced in the gut, but also and by the gut bacteria, but the gut bacteria also have a huge role in regulating these. So it's not to forget that, our serotonin is produced by gut mucosal cells, and those mucosal cells are also littered with enteric nervous system neurons. And also the serotonin has a job to do in the gut as well, because serotonin also regulates the motility of the gut.
Yeah.
So it's not really surprising, to be honest, that the IBS quite often comes hand in hand with depression, or severely. So when people are severely depressed, they can also be severely constipated as well. So that's kind of a really interesting fact. So basically, the way it works is that indigenous bacteria can produce metabolites that signal to something called enterochromatin cells. Right? These are actually endocrine cells. So these cells have one end that stick into the gut lumen and the other that faces other adjacent cells and underlying connective tissue. And the end that reaches into the lumen gets influenced and stimulated by these metabolites produced by microbes. And the other end is actually a synapse that reaches into and connects with these sensory vagal nerve endings. And these then increase the secretion of 5-HTP, 5-HT. So, you can see already how the endocrine system is connecting into the nervous system. And there's also another theory about how serotonin is affected by the gut bacteria. So basically, gut bacteria can either directly synthesize tryptophan or also indirectly impact tryptophan availability and therefore serotonin synthesis by sort of affecting the activity of enzymes responsible for tryptophan degradation along the kynurenine pathway.
You're talking IDO here.
I'm talking IDO, yeah. So tell me a bit about IDO. And
so we know pro-inflammatory cytokines, high levels of cortisol, upregulate IDO, and we don't really need to go into the long length of what that is, but it's the key enzyme that shifts tryptophan away from serotonin, from dopamine, from melatonin. So we're starting to see issues with sleep, with anxiety, even cognitive function. And we start to go down this rather neurotoxic route. So we start to sort of produce a kynurenine, if I pronounce it correctly, which then activates our NMDA receptors, and that kind of eats away out of our brains, really. We also see an impact on brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor as well. So these are the growth factors that are involved in sort of regulating, our synaptic activity and things like that. And it's one of the sort of key biomarkers of depression, dementia, and so on. So it's not surprising. It's not surprising. And the other thing, NMDA, overactivity by glutamate, for example, we normally would have a little magnesium molecule sitting in there, looking after things, making sure that it doesn't get overstimulated. What happens when we're classically stressed?
Oh, no
magnesium. No magnesium.
I know. Well, so effectively, when you have dysbiosis, that's knocking out protection that the gut gives the brain, because what we're saying here is that actually when you have dysbiosis, the gut, fundamentally the takeaway point is that then takes away the protection to the brain from all these neurotoxic metabolites that are then
absolutely
having this knock-on effect on the pathway. And also what's really quite amazing is that those enterochromatin cells that are littered throughout our gut, actually, when added them all up, apparently they end up being the biggest endocrine organ in the body.
Yes.
So that makes it really obvious how important the gut is.
Absolutely. So from our little diagram, you can see the three little major ones at the top there. So, we need to make sure that we've got plenty of short-chain fatty acids. We need to make sure that our mucin levels are nice and, rich, protective barrier, tight junctions. And if we can optimize all of those, then we don't start to see this sort of immune imbalance, nuclear factor B activation, no pro-inflammatories, and so on. So it's about dealing with it as high up as possible, rather than waiting until we're right down here. So by the time we get right down at the bottom here, this is where our antidepressant sort of prescriptions start to kick in, and it's like, no, go back up, deal with it earlier. Okay, so So in terms of omega-3, and I've talked about it a little bit, and I've talked about how wonderful they are in terms of sort of intervention. We know that omega-3s are really useful in terms of sort of helping to modulate depressive symptoms. And we generally kind of think of them as being anti-inflammatories. If I had to use one word to sum up omega-3, sum up EPA, it would be anti-inflammatory. But actually, in terms of, let's focus on gut. What are they doing in the gut? And the evidence is there. So omega-3s, they elaborate the type of bacteria that are butyrate producers. So they encourage the growth of those particular bacteria that are known to produce butyrate. They also increase the bacteria that produce folate as well. So folate is really important for obviously sort of healthy methylation and so on, which is also very good for sort of neurotransmitters and so on. Omega-3s upregulate the gene expression of tight junction protein, so that's another key area. Mucosal immunity. So omega-3s, high levels of omega-3 tend to have this balancing effect on Th17 and T regulatory cells. So we get, our immune system sort of balanced out in the gut, so less pro-inflammatory products. And they also help with the synthesis of mucin production as well. So, this sort of barrier function. So there's all of these kind of protective mechanisms that are in place. And we know that omega-3s are particularly good at all of these because we've seen studies that look at sort of oral issues, inflammation, gastrointestinal diseases, where inflammation and bacterial dysbiosis play a role. So not necessarily depression related, but we know that omega-3s help with dysbiosis, and they help with inflammation, and they help with gut barrier function. So the two are very much, very much interweaved.
Yeah, and I think the one that fascinates me the most, really, and it's probably the most simple of all of them, is the top one where you talk about omega-3s actually encouraging the gut, the composition of the gut microbiota to be that we need, butyrate function producing ones that are going to help with the tight junctions that are going to keep the gut wall healthy. And I think that's a real takeaway point for all of us to have, that actually it is working on those bacteria, encouraging those bacteria to reproduce.
It's like giving your little probiotics a bodyguard. Taking them down there, and it's like, back off, everybody. We'll look after you.
That's a really important takeaway point, I think.
The combination of the two, and we're going to see some slides there sort of back up that evidence in a minute.
Fantastic.
So omega-3, brilliant. Probiotics, brilliant. Individually, let's bring them together. So this is where it really kind of gets really interesting as well. So in terms of, I've talked about omega-3s being anti-inflammatory, and EPA in particular is known to be very anti-inflammatory. That the sort of EPA-DHA ratio is really, really important. But what is probably less known is that probiotics, and specific species again, have been shown to be incredibly beneficial, not only in tight junctions, but actually lowering pro-inflammatory cytokine levels. So we're talking about things like interleukin-6, TNF-alpha. So together again, so probiotics, omega-3, both potently anti-inflammatory, which is really, really important when we're talking about inflammation being at the root of not just depression, but just sort of Western classic sort of disease, really, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is where it gets really good. So our omega-3 probiotics together, we get upregulation of short-chain fatty acid producing microbes. You start producing lots of butyrate. Butyrate starts to sort of send the messages through into the cells. We get upregulation of TREG cells, so our T-regulatory, anti-inflammatory. Let's balance it out. We see elevated levels of things like interleukin-10, which is our anti-inflammatory cytokine. Brilliant, interleukin. We then see this upregulation of MUC2, which is our mucin, which is going to be sort of helping with our barrier function. But at the same level, and this is where it kind of gets interesting for you as well, is that we see upregulation of the enzyme tyrosine hydroxylase, And this is the key rate-limiting enzyme that is involved in neurotransmitter production. So it's not surprising that when you combine omega-3 and probiotics, not only do you get this anti-inflammatory effect, but you actually get increased levels of neurotransmitters, which is really, really key to sort of, sort of mood and brain function generally.
Absolutely. And it's quite interesting that the research now is starting to come out, both of these put together.
Yes, this kind of synergy. So, and then, this is a nice one as well. So the other thing that fish oils, so we get fish oils in combination with probiotics. We were talking earlier about sort of non-beneficial bacterial metabolites. So we're talking about sort of lipopolysaccharides. That gets blocked. Toll-like 4 receptors get blocked. And this is where our pro-inflammatory cytokine levels start to go down. And this is a nice study that was published again fairly recently. And, combining probiotics specifically. And in this case, it was purely with EPA.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That's what you were saying earlier about that particular aspect, that particular omega being particularly important for the gut.
Yes.
In combination with.
And this is, this is an area that you'll probably be more specialist in than me, but it's about promoting tolerance. So you were talking to me a bit about that earlier. So it's not just about taking a probiotic; it's about keeping it in there and making sure that it sort of is able to sort of withhold it. Yeah. So that's the whole kind of thing.
Well, it goes back again to the whole. It goes back again to the whole dysbiotic thing about the balance really being so important, which is why we sometimes recommend maybe 2 different probiotics. So, for example, going back to Saccharomyces boulardii, and then maybe a mixed probiotic where you've got 4 strains or something in there, where you've got strains that are combating pathogenic bacteria, trying to clear those out, then bringing in the healthy bacteria that can then take up the space on the gut wall and start reducing that immune response that then has a knock-on effect with inflammatory response.
But I guess it's not all probiotics actually get and do what you intend them to sort of do, which again comes back down to you have to choose your probiotic really carefully, and if it's not evidence-based, then you may well be wasting money and wasting time and that kind of thing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's definitely fair to say. So with probiotics, it's very interesting because there's kind of 2 approaches you can take. One is that you are specifically looking for something that is specifically going to help with constipation or diarrhea or particularly usually research behind immunity, or in fact we have a probiotic that helps with female intimate health.
Yep.
So you can see there that a particular strain of rhamnosus might be good for the gut, but actually the other strain within that species will be good for female intimate health. So they will do very, very different things.
Yeah.
So the approach really is, the practitioner, is to what are you looking at in the gut, what are you trying to alleviate. So if you've got somebody with huge constipation problems, you need to actually deal with that first.
Yes.
Before the gut can then start to stabilize and the gut microbiota can get a more healthy balance, and then you can start coming in with more foods, for example, and helping the diversity of the bacteria. But we also need to be looking at other aspects where you might actually not have a specific issue. It's just about the gut actually being in an unhealthy state. So
I think there's so many layers, aren't there?
But I think everyone's different, and I think therefore, for us as practitioners, it's then for us to help make that decision for the client, which probiotic to take for that particular problem.
Yeah, great. So I think that takes us on to another level of let's have a look at some protocols.
Yeah. Okay.
So some take-home messages, I think, really are about sort of what we know about probiotics and what we know about omega-3s, and we've been having some wonderful conversations today about how to summarize it in a really clear, understandable, take-home kind of way. What do you need to know? And that's about tight junctions.
Yes.
We've got to be able to.
Yeah.
We've got to be able to make sure that our tight junctions are nice and tight.
Yeah.
We've got to make sure that our immune balancing is correct, because our gut needs to be able to lay a restraint, yet be ready to defend the mucosal barrier from bacterial infections. Yeah. We need to be able to make sure that our tryptophan production is nice and balanced and nice and healthy. So we want to be pushing tryptophan towards producing serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, neurotransmitters in general.
Not the other way.
Absolutely. We do not want neurotoxic end products,
no.
because they will eat your brain.
Oh,
literally. And HPA for active balancing as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that omega-3s are known to do is to reduce cortisol really effectively. Yeah. Really.
That they what? Reduce cortisol.
Yeah, when your levels are high, that sounds bad, doesn't it? But
no,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
So omega-3s can be really sort of like calming in terms of cortisol balancing, anti-inflammatories, and reducing inflammation and oxidative stress as well is really, really important. Fantastic. So that's the kind of summary. This is what we know happens. So I think that it's not just about taking a probiotic and omega-3, is it? Though? No. Because we have to do, and you practitioners out there, you will know this by now, but we will just touch on it briefly.
Yeah. So, we always like to go in and look at specifics, but I think when we actually talk to our clients, we have to come straight, we have to draw back from this. And as practitioners, we're all pretty much trained up in the 5 R's of gut healing.
Yes.
And these, we've seen here how fundamental a gut is to not only, autoimmune diseases, but to also mental health. So really starting with the gut is going to be the biggest part of your protocol here. So just to run over it quite briefly, run through it. So first thing we need to do is remove anything that could be negatively affecting our gut. So this could be parasites, it could be pathogenic bacteria, it could be, wheat and dairy. People often know themselves whether they're actually reacting to these things. But also we have to take away stress. We have to think holistically about this.
Absolutely.
I know exactly what stress does to my body and how I feel when I'm not stressed. We all do. And actually, if you step back in your life and you think about that, then you know how important it is to take that stress out as much as you can. We need to think about replacing, so supporting our digestion. So it's not just probiotics that's important, it's also the other aspects of digestion that's important as well. So as practitioners, you'll obviously be thinking about enzymes, hydrochloric acid, or it could be even apple cider vinegar, for example. But also, again, let's go to the emotional side. So it's also things like mindful eating practices. Let's stop running down the street, eating our sandwiches, that kind of thing.
And it's surprising how many people do not understand the importance of actually just sitting down quietly, not in front of the television, get your knife and fork, chew it slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. Or going back to basics, sitting at the table as a family. I know that we've been talking about all this science, and it is fascinating, and it is important, and it is real. But so is sitting there around the table as a family, or with each other, or with your friends,
and engaging. And that social interaction is so important.
Food, not just being fuel on the go. And then re-inoculating. So that's when obviously probiotics come into this. So choosing a really good, well-researched probiotic, obviously really important thing to focus on here. But also then, thinking about, what else you might want to add into that. So, there's a lot of talk about organic vegetables being really important. Or there was, I can't even remember who it was, but there was somebody who was talking very much about organic vegetables that aren't even washed properly, because, then you've got soil bacteria in there and you can increase diversity that way. Some people may want to have fermented products as well.
Yeah, you've got to feed your little good guys. If you don't feed them, then,
Yeah. And then repairing as well. So you're kind of replaced, you've inoculated, but then you need to soothe that gut lining,
Absolutely.
And then you come in with other things like L-glutamine, maybe some zinc, some aloe vera, some bone broth and collagen, but also omega-3.
Omega-3. Don't forget vitamin D3.
Oh, thank you. And vitamin D3, really important.
Really important.
And then rebalance. again, let's just take it back to something a little bit more holistic. All very great and wonderful taking these wonderful probiotics and omega-3s that we've been telling you about, but if we're all going to be complete stress bunnies, we're going to be, you know, fighting a battle here. So let's think about our sleep, or clients rather, sleep, you know, stress management, exercise, and breathing, making sure we're breathing properly. Let's not forget we're in the stress response. Our gut is being starved of oxygen. So it's all of these things put together that can actually combine to make a really powerful process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this kind of isn't just about gut healing as well. You're thinking about sort of the importance of sleep, physical activity, again, going back to the evidence, you know, being physically inactive in itself can increase your risk of developing depression by about 20%. You know, not getting enough sleep is another sort of key risk factor for depression. I mean, you just have to look at sort of shift workers, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all of these things together. I mean, you guys out there, you know this kind of stuff, but so, you know, this is really just a summary of what you're supposed to be doing. And now we're just going to sort of go through a few kind of recommendations So
as Scott mentioned before, probiotics, so we look at it very much from a strain-specific point of view. So those particular strains that I mentioned in the studies are in fact in our everyday product. So this is a sort of a 5 billion product. It's got these strains in it. So if you've got a client who has actually a fairly healthy gut, but you are looking to support their mental health directly and only, then this would be a really good product. Alternatively, if you've got somebody who is suffering from IBS and IBD and lots of other issues, actually, you know, you might be wanting to look at a slightly higher strength product and also with different strains. And so, for example, the Lactobacillus acidophilus TFM is the world's most researched acidophilus and is really good for pain and bloating, whereas the two bifidobacterium strains in there have been really well researched for immunity and stabilization after antibiotics. So, you know, it would probably be useful to recommend this to your client, or maybe even a combination of both, because then you get both sets of kind of. So
you can mix and match these.
You can't overdose on probiotics.
You can't overdose.
No, because let's face it, they're all different. They're all different strains. We have trillions of probiotics, trillions of bacteria in our body, in our gut, on our hands, everywhere. So actually, even though it just seems like quite a lot, 20 billion, just seems like, you know, somebody who's not very bacteria savvy, I think actually it's been quite hard to educate people that actually taking a capsule full of bacteria is a sensible thing to do. But I think that message is getting through now.
Yeah.
But also Saccharomyces boulardii, so somebody who's got definitely got pathogenic bacteria going on, dysbiosis, or you really suspect leaky gut, again, Saccharomyces boulardii is a product that would be recommendable. I personally would feel that it's really good to take that alongside one of the everyday products, whichever one you decide is best. Yeah. But yeah, there's more to learn, and you know, happy to talk.
So there's certainly a selection to cover a lot of avenues there, which is really good, and mix and match as well. So
but I mean, I think my point being is that we have specific evidence behind those two strains on mental health, but you can't necessarily, you know, there may be, if we did the research on that, on the everyday strength, we may find that does actually also get some really positive results for mental health, but the research hasn't been done yet.
Well, this is it. I mean, we're still learning, aren't we?
Still learning,
and you know, the whole kind of area here is so in its infancy, if you like. So, so there's a lot more research to come, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So omega-3s.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So the evidence, the interventions, the meta-analysis tell us that a high EPA to DHA ratio is the most effective intervention. So for this reason, if you're looking primarily for helping a client who has a sort of diagnosed or suspected sort of mood disorder, and this can be anything from bipolar, schizophrenia, clinical depression, anxiety, stress, EPA, through various mechanisms, which I'm not going to go and repeat all over again, is going to be your most effective sort of port of call. We then would suggest moving on to an EPA and DHA blend, maybe sort of 3 to 6 months after the initial EPA intervention. One thing we do recommend, and again, this is really down to the fact that most people will totally overestimate their omega-3 intake. You know, people will say, well, I eat oily fish a couple of times a week, but what people don't seem to understand is that actually the omega-3 levels within our oily fish have plummeted by about half in the last 5 years or so. So whilst we, you know, we do recommend a couple of portions of oily fish a week, you're probably not getting as much long-chain omega-3s as you think you may well be. And most people, when they do test for their omega-3 index, so we should be aiming to have about 8% of the fats in our cell membranes to be omega-3, EPA and DHA.
Right.
The average in the UK is about 4%.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you ask people what they think their levels are, they will always overestimate. It's very, very rare that somebody has their omega-3 levels tested and comes back and says, that was surprisingly high. So yeah. So most people think that their levels are higher than they actually are.
What I think is people think they just, you know, they have fish twice a week, that's going to be enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not, is it?
No, unfortunately it's not. If you know, if you've got a client who doesn't want to test, or you know, can't afford to test because sometimes there is a sort of financial aspect to this, then we would recommend a minimum of 1 gram of EPA. So there have been some really nice studies that have shown dose effects. And if we were to assume that you've got a starting level of about 4%, the average sort of dose needed to get your levels up to a sort of healthy 8% is anywhere between sort of 1 and 1.5 grams. And people say, really, as much as that? And this is where we're kind of failing in terms of sort of omega-3 interventions, is because most of the studies tend to underdose.
Right.
So you're not seeing a therapeutic effect a lot of the time because you're just simply not taking enough omega-3 to get your levels to the kind of sort of, I was going to say height, but that's not quite what I mean. We need to be aiming at about 8%. You know, and everybody is very different as well.
Yeah,
so if I take a gram of omega-3 and you take a gram of omega-3, you're going to see very different outcomes from it, because your baseline levels might be higher or it might be lower than mine. As an omega-3 user, I assume mine to be higher than yours, but I'll challenge you on that maybe.
Yeah, I'm happy to do the test.
So omega-3s are obviously, you know, when it comes to sort of mood disorders or helping with anxiety, this is our first port of call. So this is our primary recommendation. And again, you know, we're talking about the benefits of combining nutrients and the importance of synergy. So, you know, nutrients don't act alone. They work together. We know for gut health, you need, you know, vitamin D3, you need, you know, you need magnesium, you need vitamin A, just for sort of gut cell integrity. So, you know, our multivitamin mineral is a broad spectrum, 22 vitamins and minerals. A lot in there are going to be directly beneficial for supporting gut health, but also for looking at sort of methylation, you know, making glutathione, for example, really, really important in sort of methylation. Astaxanthin. The reason that we recommend this is because if you, you know, if you have a pro-inflammatory environment, which we often see, you know, we're talking about inflammation.
We're talking about
one of the last things you really want to do is, you know, throw in 1 gram of long-chain omega-3 into that, because omega-3 are, you know, they are susceptible to peroxidation. So if you've got high levels of inflammation, you put 1 gram of long-chain omega-3 in there, you may actually just end up fueling the problem rather than getting rid of it.
Really
So absolutely. And again, this is why sometimes when we see studies being published, when they say, well, no, it didn't work, or, you know, we didn't expect to see that, and it's like, well, okay, did you do this? Did you do this? What was your methodology? And you do a sort of, you know, deep dive into it, and you start to really kind of understand what's going on. So we always recommend taking really good quality, you know, antioxidant besides, you know, at the same time as you're taking your omega-3 supplement. And it's also important as well to split those. So everybody is very fixated on this sort of like 1 a day mega supplement, you know, 1 gram of omega-3 all in one capsule, and it's like, no, you wouldn't do that in nature. You wouldn't eat half a side of salmon. So why are you trying to do it with your supplement? So we keep our capsules small, easy to swallow, and we emphasise the importance of split dosing all the way, and taking it alongside a good quality antioxidant. So astaxanthin, this is our recommendation. This is the most wonderful antioxidant. It sits in your cell membrane, it anchors onto the outside, it anchors onto the inside, and it spans the membrane inside. So it's looking after, oxidative stress on the outside, on the inside, and throughout as well. So water soluble and fat soluble. It's brilliant, absolutely. Obviously, other sort of antioxidants, you can give vitamin C, maybe extra C, vitamin E, all play a sort of synergistic role here as well. And then triple magnesium. I mean, we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about stress, we're talking about NMDA activity. As I said earlier, if you haven't got enough magnesium, if your stress levels are high and your magnesium is plummeted, then your poor little NMDA receptors are going to be open for glutamate and other sort of agonists to come in and start sort of squeaking along that line. And so elevating your magnesium intake is really, really important. It's one of those kind of ones that's really relaxing. And I think that kind of summarises it. So again, it's about synergy. So
it is, and that's omega-3s, what it all boils down to, really.
Probiotics, and a few little extras here as well. And so I hope, or we hope, we hope that you'll forgive us for the slight kerfuffle at the beginning of the webinar. This is our contact details, and we will be very, very happy to answer any questions that you may have. If there's practitioners out there who want to get in touch, maybe set up a trade account.
No, absolutely. So we do obviously offer trade accounts, which offer you 40% of our products. But obviously, a lot of our CAM practitioners order through the natural dispensary, which is fantastic because obviously then you can get all the products you need for your gut protocol at the same time. But we are really keen to get to know our CAM practitioners. So, for example, we offer free training with a free trial product at the end of it. And also we now offer an affiliate scheme. If you're big on your websites and blog posts and you like to set up affiliate schemes, we do offer that now. So, please drop us a line at campractitioners@renlabs.com, and myself or one of my other members of the team will get back to you. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have about clients specifically, or just pop you on some training so that you can learn about all our products if that's what's interesting to you. So that, I think, pretty much brings us to the end of our webinar. So just want to say thank you so much for your time. I know it's late and we've overrun slightly. It's been really, thank you so much for having me here. It's been really enjoyable.
So Danielle is in the background. She's accruing all the questions, and we promise we will get back to you. So join us again at another time. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.